Hello again, I am Blunty, and welcome to Blunty's More Than Tweet-Worthy News, the crispy... Crispy? You know what? Yes, crispy. The show is crispy. Crispy little mini-show, keeping it clean and simple, little segmented show of stuff and things I've discovered throughout the week that are either too long for a tweet, but not really that long enough for a whole video all on its own. Or somewhere in the middle. Goal. Na 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 na. At the top of the show, of course, we have to talk about the new Pokemon news. If you've been around here long enough, and especially if you've been to my streams over on Twitch, you will know I'm a big Pokemon fan. Always have been. Well, not always have been, but I got there on Generation 1. I was a bit late to Generation 1, but I got there at Generation 1. I've been playing Pokemon games ever since, and I love them. So there's new news. New Pokemon. New variations of Pokemon. New rivals. But it seems our two main rivals are Marnie and Beedee. Possibly how they're pronounced. Part of Team Yell, inspired by English sort of punk sort of era, sort of stylistic choices and things like that, because the region, the Galar region, is of course loosely based on England. And that sort of punk rock aesthetic also makes its way into new regional variations for the Zigzagoon line and a new evolution for Zigzagoon called, what is it called again? I've already forgotten the name. Obstagoon, who many people have rather easily made the connection between the style and look of Obstagoon and, of course, Gene Simmons, lead performer of Kiss. Similar thing, although Gene Simmons himself, not English, not a punk band, and frankly the Obstagoon, his eye thing looks more like a star, so it's a bit more like Star Child than the Demon, which is the character that Gene Simmons plays in the. I guess because the tongue hangs out and more people know Gene Simmons' name rather than... I don't even remember. What was Star Child's real name? I've forgotten already. I think the kitty cat one. But I do like there's a new refresh of Zigzagoon. Zigzagoon's one of my personal favorites. Everyone loves to hate on Zigzagoon. He's only really useful, or was only useful, as a HM slave in the original games he appeared in. But again, if you go back to my streams, he kind of became an in-stream meme at one point through... We just kept getting gooned through the Wonder Trades, and eventually, as we wound up that playthrough, I caught a shiny Zigzagoon as a joke, and kind of he became a thing. Then, of course, we've got Galarian, the Galar region variation of Weezing, who now has a top hat style thing and a very sort of British beard arrangement, but the top hat is also kind of a smokestack thing, sort of an industrial revolution thing going on. I think it's a brilliant design. A lot of people have mocked it, and it does look a bit silly, but it's a Pokemon game. Of course they look silly. It also has drawn some comparisons to a bong, because it's got one long pipe and one shorter pipe, and there's smoke pouring out of it. So that's a bulb at the bottom, basically. It's not a long bow to draw on that one. I don't know whether the designers really thought that through entirely, but I guarantee you, before too much longer, on Etsy or eBay, you will find some Galarian Weezing bongs out there. Na 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 na. In other nerd news, we take one step closer to a Star Trek future. NASA, some wildly clever people at NASA have figured out how to make food out of thin air. Basically, that's what the catchy headline was anyway. But what they're actually doing is combining water and CO2 and electricity and some clever know-how to create a protein powder, which is capable of, significantly sustaining human life. I mean, it's not Soylent Green; it doesn't give you everything you need, and what they actually create is being compared to, in texture and taste and usefulness, as wheat flour. So being able to just create this product, this food product, out of thin air, without the agricultural impact of growing other, grains and stuff like that we usually use for this kind of protein. And it is 50% protein content, 5 to 10% fat, and 20 to 25% carbs. So it's not nothing. It's a carbon neutral process, apparently. So this could be a very exciting, world-changing thing as this develops on, becomes hopefully a practical commercial product that can be competitive with and perhaps replace significant portions of our traditional sources of these kinds of proteins from grain sources like wheat. And when you're thinking about combining this achievement with the achievements that have been made in meat-free meat replacement burger type products. There are great strides being made in these meat replacement things using proteins from soy and other kind of stuff we grow. If this protein product could be used to then make a fake meat thing, that sort of can take a significant strain off another agricultural, the impact of farming animals and things like that. And, smush these things together and get, the finances and the politicians and everything else on board. And we could stand a chance of living an extra 20 or 30 years before we explode into flames on this miserable doomed planet. Na 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 na. In slightly related news, speaking of Soylent Green, Nissin, another brand I shouldn't have to explain to most of you, they're one of the biggest names in instant noodles, basically. If you don't know the name off the top of your head, you've probably eaten their product. Anyway, they're everywhere, all across the world as far as I know. Everywhere I've gone, I've been able to get Nissin noodles for a quick emergency snack. Well, they're bringing out a line of noodle products that are kind of like Soylent Green in that they claim it has everything the body needs. Now, regular instant noodles, you shouldn't eat them all the time. They are delicious and lovely and easy and simple and quick and all the good things about instant noodles, but they tend to be not extremely good for you from a nutritional point of view. They tend to be pretty high in sodium, for example, and the carbs are sort of a bit mismatched with all the rest of the nutrients. But these noodles, they've developed a way of making these noodles that are basically hollow noodles, and inside they put a bunch of other good stuff in there as well, so you can make them like regular instant noodles. So it takes slightly longer. Instead of like 2 or 3 minutes, it takes 3 to 5 minutes, for example, I think. But they say you could live off these things and not do yourself any damage in the long term, like you could possibly do with trying to live off instant ramen for way too long. You can do all sorts of nasty stuff with you, mainly because of the sodium content. It's not good for you. Let's say each individual packet of these noodles, one serving basically, has more than 1/3 of your minimum daily requirements of all the stuff and things. The carbohydrates and the sugars and the trace minerals and the vitamins and all the kind of stuff you need so you don't die or get sick or both. First one then the other, usually. I'm very excited to actually try them because if they taste noodle neutral, it's a very exciting thing. Because I love noodles, but of course, like I keep saying, I have to restrict how many. Because I could eat pack after pack after pack after pack, and I have done that at times in my lives, and it has contributed significantly to me putting a bunch of weight back on, which I don't need. An individual pack of plain noodles is about 400 yen, so that works out to about $3.70-ish American. So the article states, I haven't checked that math. It sounds about right to me. So about $4 for a full meal, basically. Unless you wanted to add extra stuff to it, then the price will vary depending on what you. But call it less than $5 for a meal for a proper, nutritious, healthy meal. Currently, they're only available from the Nissin website, and that's in Japanese. I use Google Translate to try and look at some of the stuff, but it doesn't seem like there's a way for me to order any. But if and when they do ever release them sort of worldwide or offer worldwide shipping or something like that, then I definitely want to try them out. If you are in Japan or are fluent enough in Japanese or have a friend in Japan that can then send them to you, they're available from the 19th. So end of this week, basically, right? Thereabouts. Na 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 na. In more video game news, and this one I probably could do an entire video on, probably at least 20-25 minutes long, just ranting and raving about the entire situation, or just orbiting this issue. But I wanted to bounce off it real quick. We might come back to it when this is actually implemented, because Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo are all smushing their heads together and going, you know what? Seems like the publishers are throwing a little bit too much aggregation the way of the video game industry right now when it comes to loot boxes and all the kinds of nasty, shitty, most gross gambling mechanic bullcrap that they like to shove in their games these days to pull every single possible cent out of the consumer as possible. And that's probably not good if we want to keep selling hardware to people who buy games, because if they manage to completely tank the video game industry or even just damage it a little bit, that's less money we can make. So let's get together and all agree, shake hands, and say, hey, you know what? If you want to publish your video games on our platforms, that's all the video game platforms, apart from PC, but that's a Wild West kind of situation, which will probably just fall into line naturally when everyone else is doing it already. But if you want to publish your games on our platform, the absolute minimum you're going to have to do right now when it comes to these loot box crap is publish clear and concise documentation on exactly what the odds are. It's still glorified gambling. In fact, it's worse than gambling because you can't even make your money back. You're spending money on pretend stuff imaginary goods and service, just a pretend T-shirt and things like that. It's way worse than gambling, but they use all the gambling tricks and sneaky psychology and stuff. You know, watch some Jim Sterling videos. He talks about it again and again and again and again and again. Point is, though, just one little step forward. The video game giants of Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo saying, you know what? If you're not going to behave yourselves, we're going to have to look like we're going to do something about it. So we're going to do something about it. Another quick bite and another piece of food. It's not been video game and foods this week. But there's a Twitter post I stumbled across. I don't know what I was looking for or who retweeted it or favoured it, but somehow it wound up in my feed and I went, oh, that sounds interesting. There's a guy named Seamus Blackley who his Twitter bio says, physicist, frenemy of photons, an amateur gastroegyptologist. That's the last bit we're interested in because in his amateur gastroegyptologism, which basically means he's interested in food from the ancient world, and Egypt and stuff like that. Apparently they got some ancient Egyptian pottery that used to have like bread and stuff in it, or was part of what they made bread with, and scraped off some samples and said, well, that's some really old yeast in there. It's probably contaminated with a bunch of other stuff, sort of modern stuff, but it might be worth trying to isolate that ancient yeast and making some bread with it. So that's what he did. He's in the process of it now. He hasn't sort of come up with a final product and is not absolutely sure that he's purified it down. So he's just getting the ancient yeast that he's sort of revived and used to make bread. But he did it a few tests so far, and he's made some sourdough bread with it using ancient grains and ancient techniques and all that sort of stuff. And he's trying to make an authentic, bread that they might have eaten 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago in Egypt. Maybe not that long ago. 4,500 years ago. It says right there in the tweet. Should have 4,500 years ago. Just trying to emulate the kind of bread they were making. And apparently it tastes wildly different to the average sourdough you might get these days. And I'll link down below to the Twitter thread of it if you're curious about it. Anyway, you can keep an eye on it. I will be. I thought it was fascinating. Two bits of robotics news also caught my eye this week as well. Number one was a kind of a tail apparatus to help with balancing and things and giving humans extra agility. So, a lot of mammals out there, cats and all that kind of stuff, and, monkeys and things like that have tails of various types and lengths and weights and things like that help them counterbalance their body weight when they're leaping around and stuff like that. Well, someone's made an exoskeleton tail for humans that does exactly that. They're working on it now. It still relies on an external source of compressed air to actuate the movement, all that sort of stuff, but they're working on minimizing it down. And it could actually be a practical thing for people who do need to go around and lift up heavy things constantly because it counterbalances, it changes where the stress is on your back and over your hips and things like that. And it could be, number one, simpler, cheaper, easier, and more universal than exoskeleton type things that sort of clamp onto your legs and your hips and your arms and things like that, because it's just counterbalancing you so you can do the work more easily rather than trying to support you with an exoskeleton that is much more complex, has to be fitted to each individual person, it's much more difficult to control, needs a fancier computer and everything, whereas this is just a little tail thingy. It was brilliant. The other bit of robotics news, I'm not even going to do a transition this one, is working on teaching robots to feel pain. I'm not even kidding. Soft robotics, things that are sort of useful for dealing with delicate things and surgeries and things like that. We've already come up with polymers that can sort of self-heal. So when the special polymer gets damaged, it just sort of heals itself, fixes itself. This is already in a lot of commercial products out there. You can find it on coatings, things, self-healing paints and things like that. Some cars have them these days even. But they're working on a system whereby the robot can feel pain, or more accurately, detect damage, which could be interpreted as pain, to paraphrase a line from a very famous movie about the dangers of teaching robots too much about what we are about. And one of those things was sensing damage that could be interpreted as pain. I'm not sure it's a particularly good idea to teach robots how to feel pain, is what I'm saying. In things you might have missed this week, just a moment from my stream. I'm not gonna cross promote all the other videos I published. Well, I say all the other videos, 3 videos. That's not 3. That's 3. Shocker. 3 videos I published last week, but there was a moment in my stream that I found particularly fun. I was taking part in the World of Warcraft Classic stress test over the weekend, and there was huge crowds, like much bigger than the last stress test. I think they were piling more people onto each sort of set. Anyway, but there was a moment where everyone who was on there from hour 1 we hit a clump there was a quest you have to do where you have to kill one special named NPC. It wasn't like go and get these random mobs that just spawn out in the world. It was just one specific NPC you had to go get. First one of such quests. And I was expecting a big mob, just a huge swarm of people. What I found was a lineup. Get a little bit more. Everybody waiting for him to fucking spawn. There's a literal line. I've never seen that before. I've never seen this kind of courtesy in a game before. I just think that's one of the most glorious things ever. I never expected to see that. It formed a line, a nice little orderly line. It eventually kind of fell apart after a while. All right, now the line is completely dissolved. But for a long time there was a nice orderly line and people were staying with their own group. And well, there was one guy trying to cut, but everyone was shouting at him in chat and he buggered off eventually. But it was wonderful. Congratulations, World of Warcraft players. You are the most polite gamers in the history of gaming. Or at least for that little 15-minute section you were. It's probably going to dissolve rather quickly, I imagine. And finally, I'd like to cap off these videos with a bit of gear that I wouldn't mind owning very much at all, either need or want. In this case, it's want. I don't need it. I have other graphics cards. I have a couple of graphics cards that are more powerful. But I was very, very impressed with the AMD 5700. And now we're just seeing various manufacturers, third parties, talk about the custom coolers and stuff that they'll be offering with this card. Which is relatively rare on AMD cards. You normally don't get a lot of variety on them. In some cases, the only option is AMD's own, in-house variety. But the 5700 has been popular enough that all the other companies, like even the big guys like MSI, who we're talking about now, are going, you know what? People actually want this. Really good card, really good price, really good performance. Nice little mishmash there. Let's make something special. So MSI have been teasing out their, let me get the name right, the RX 5700 XT Evoke graphics card. And I like it for several reasons. Number one, like I said, already tested the 5700, not as Big Brother, but the 5700 already impressed me. The Big Brother one is just even better. I like MSI as a brand. They make good gear. Their graphics cards have served me very, very well. I like the coolers on the graphics cards in particular. This is one of the reasons I like the graphics cards. With the exception of the absolute sort of bottom of the range, where the coolers are adequate-ish, usually. They're sort of the middle and top tier coolers are excellent. Universally excellent. Nice and quiet, very efficient. The overclocking overhead with them, although with the 5700 series, maybe that's not such a big deal because they don't tend to overclock very well. But yeah, aside from my trust in MSI and the cooler, it looks fantastic. It has everything I love about the current swing and design that's happening in graphics card. They're going away from the very sort of angular, sharp, and gamery type stuff into a more elegant sort of industrial design kind of look. And AMD sort of helped start this with their own coolers for this later series of cards. They're all very sleek and metal and sort of minimalistic and beautiful. And MSI is sort of following in this aspect as well. It looks nice. So if I was going to get a 5700 XT, I think this is the one I would want, so far at least. But that is it this week for Blunty's More Than Tweet-Worthy News. Hope you found it interesting, or exciting, or fascinating, or just diverting for a few minutes while you have your lunch or something. I am Blunty. Thank you for watching. Do the things with the thumbs and the likes and the subscribes and the bells and the comments and all that sort of stuff. And I'll catch you next time.